Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Mavidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. May the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace, peace and beneficence be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. Well, welcome everyone and namaste. This is the gathering to read and discuss Swami Ranganathananda's priceless jewel of a small book called Divine Grace. We're on, as Haima pointed out to us, page 17. So, Cindy, did you want to start reading, or do you just want to turn it over to Jeff right away?
I'm just trying to find, I'm having a little trouble finding where I'm. Okay, let me see.
This is a language that only a divine incarnation.
It's not pulling up page numbers for me. It's pulling up location numbers, and I don't know why.
Location 327, or no, 337. If that makes any sense to you.
Let's see, I'm looking for the 3.
The heading is manliness leading to godliness. Under that heading.
I'm sorry, I can't find it.
Okay, Jeff, have you got it?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so start with, this is a language that only a divine incarnation can use.
Okay. This is a language that only a divine incarnation can use, not a mere saint. Be thou whole, thy sins are forgiven. Take refuge in me. This self-surrender and true self-discovery is the eternal message of pure religion, the final consummation of man's long spiritual quest and evolutionary struggle. To whom is one surrendering? Not to another creature like oneself, however high and mighty he or she may be in society. That will be foolish. No such creature is worthy of worship or self-surrender by a spiritual seeker, says the Hindu Bhakti tradition. Sri Ramanujacharya, did I say that close?
Close, yeah.
Quotes an ancient acharya in this connection in his Sri Bhashya on the Brahma Sutras. The English translation is, "From Brahma the Creator to a clump of grass, all beings that are within the world of change are slaves of birth and death caused by karma. Therefore, they cannot be helpful as subjects of meditation for those who meditate, because they are all caught up within the network of ignorance and are within the limitations of samsara, or relativity and finitude."
Okay, let's hold it right there. So the Swami very carefully contrasts and compares for us what an incarnation or saint can say versus what a person however high their station in the world is, their capability of offering us or being worthy of our surrender, or being worthy of our true devotion and allegiance. So any comments or questions about that? This is a very key point. Why is it that we worship and hold in such reverence the incarnations and saints? Because they can offer us this "be thou forgiven." Mhm. They can remove our karma.
So, Hari Om Shankaraji.
Hari Om, dear.
So this, I think this Swami is saying that even though we have reverence to all the gurus and everything, we should not surrender to them. If that is the case, I remember something. When Rama went to the forest, he saw all those rishis.
Mhm.
Hello, Rama, and then went back into their meditation.
Yes.
So, they are looking at Rama as, a being,
Right.
even though they know that he is a god.
Yes, that was their ignorance. But notice he did not condemn them. He simply smiled and went on his way.
Yes.
It's not a question of condemning people who are still within samsara, ignorance. It's whatever we offer them, it is not the highest form of reverence and self-surrender. So very well said, Balakrishna. Anything else from anyone?
Brother Shankara, this
Yes.
is Jeff. I have a question.
Yes.
If he is saying from Brahma, the creator, to a clump of grass, there aren't any beings that are helpful as subjects of meditation, it sounds like most of the Ishta Devas would be disqualified.
No. Why do you say that?
Well, from Brahma, the creator, to a clump of grass, that pretty much covers all of us and the saints. And
No. He deliberately sets aside the saints. He's now quoting this verse. What he's talking about is those beings who are imprisoned within time, space, and causation, which includes Brahma. Brahma is not, if you'll notice, worshipped.
Mhm.
There is no worship of Brahma as such. I think there's one temple in all of India that is devoted to Brahma. And it's not a significant temple, so to speak.
So a very small sect.
Well, I don't even know anything about them, to tell you the truth. But what he's saying, all beings that are within the world of change and slaves of birth and death, that means prisoners of the gunas.
Right.
And so these are, it isn't that they are inconsiderable beings. This would include many wonderful embodiments, but he's setting apart from all of that those who are not slaves to the gunas and are not imprisoned within the realm of birth and death. This is the saints, the ascended masters, if you will, and the incarnations. Now, the saints, the reason that they become what they become is that the divine being actually becomes them. Jesus says this very clearly. And his saints say that that's what happened, that he actually became them. And Rabia says this also, that the beloved became her. She entered him and he became her. So this is the difference. Those beings become omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent, along with the incarnations.
I thank you. I think I'm seeing my mistake. I wasn't understanding the sentence structure, and it's really to go back to mathematics like we did last time. He's saying from Brahma, the creator, to a clump of grass. So that sets the stage for the entire universe. All beings that are within the world of change are slaves of birth and death caused by karma. That's a subset. So it's that subset that he is talking about that is not worthy of meditation.
Yes.
So tricky sentence structure, but I think I have it now. Thank you.
Well, this is the thing about the Upanishads. They are not left brain literal. They don't follow our thought structure. They are right brain. And so oftentimes the translation is very difficult. Swami Prabhupada remarks on this in his preface and introduction to his translation of the Upanishads. So anything else before we move on?
I often hear the term surrender in terms of yoga. I got clear it's not to a individual. Are we surrendering to a higher power? Is that what we're surrendering to?
Define higher power as you're using it, Brahmadas.
I suppose in our case it would be our Ishta, the divine incarnation, who we
divine incarnation, yes. And the divine incarnations are few. They are spaced apart in time and geography, but and then they do create saints, and the saints will say, "I didn't do this; they did that. The incarnations did that." And if you read the book Love Poems from God, you see that each of them says something happened, and then it wasn't the same anymore. They were beyond time, space, and causation. They shared in the omnipotence, omniscience, and omnipresence of the divine being. So anything else from anyone? Thank you, Brahmadas. Okay, read on, Jeff.
And defining Upashanam, meditation or worship, Sri Ramanuja says, meditation is a sitting near in the form of a constant and long remembrance of the subject of meditation in a uniform flow according to the teaching of the science of spirituality, like an unbroken stream of oil poured from one vessel to another.
This is a very common, in the Tao, we find the image of a river. The river is ever different, but ever the same. It flows and flows and flows and flows. And so that we can meditate on. and we should meditate in that way, letting it flow and flow and flow and flow, and yet somehow ever remaining the same. Just as this, there's another image, the image of a flame burning in of a candle or a lamp burning in a windless place. The flame does not flicker. It's this one-pointed awareness that is being pointed to. This, where we no longer are occupied by our distractions, but have focused our attention uniformly and over an extended period on a particular aspect of the divine that then reveals itself to us. In the language of the yogis, it's called samyama. It opens itself to us, and we become immersed in it. This suggested form of meditation by Vivekananda: see the flame within your heart, and within that flame there is yet another effulgence that is ever burning and ever the same. And so you ultimately, your awareness becomes united with that pure consciousness.
Brother Shankara,
Yes.
this is Jeff again. I think it's interesting that this passage talks about this flow, like an unbroken stream of oil poured from one vessel to another.
Yes.
Nowadays, much is made of being in a state of flow. You know, psychologists, and I forget the name of the gentleman that wrote the book on flow, but flow is very much in the forefront these days as being a state, a desirable state of awareness. And this passage used that idea way back when. I think that's very interesting.
Oh, well, yes, it's not a new idea. As I say, the Tao, much of the Tao's teachings about contemplation, concentration, and meditation are focused on this idea of flow. And they're very ancient. They come from China and like that part of the world. So anything else from anyone before we move on? Okay.
And the subject worthy of such meditation is God alone, as defined in the following verse of the Upanishad, and his divine incarnations. And
notice that this is the Svatasvatara Upanishad. The Svatasvatara Upanishad was Swami Prabhavananda's, my teacher's, favorite Upanishad. The reason being is its ecstatic joy, but it's very clear language. It isn't linear in the sense of left mind linear language, but it is very clear in what it means. So what does it say?
He who at the beginning of creation projected Brahma, the creator, the primal universal consciousness, and who delivered unto him the Vedas, seeking liberation, I go for refuge unto that effulgent one, whose light turns the understanding towards the infinite Atman.
Now notice that it is not Brahma again, but it is that which created Brahma that you turn your attention to. Seeking liberation, I go for refuge to that effulgent one, the one who created the creator being. Okay.
Do we call these verses or shlokas? We're at number 13. I was just wondering what
I just call them sections.
Okay. Section 13. The passage from self-reliance to self-surrender. Take refuge in me, renouncing all your dharmas. Come unto me, all ye who labor and are heavy laden. But if renunciation of all dharmas is the final consummation, there is need for that earlier part of the fulfilling of all dharmas, that earlier part of the labor, of the evolutionary struggle. This is essential if one is to be able to enjoy and benefit from that lofty relaxation of self-surrender. So work hard, perform all duties, develop yourself, then come and surrender to the highest. Do a whole day's honest work, then sit and meditate, then resign oneself to God. Otherwise, that meditation has no meaning or value. Meditation at the end of a lazy day has no meaning, but the same at the end of an active day filled with good deeds has meaning and is rewarding.
Now notice how explicit the Swami is here. This is Ranganathananda talking to a group of men at a Shivananda ashrama in Perth, Australia in 1978, saying if you just, kind of loafed around all day and not been of any consequence to yourself or anybody else, but at the end of the day, your concentration is not going to be able to become one focused because you haven't been using it that way all day long. You've just been letting it kind of, be unfocused. And he's not saying it's wrong to have a day like that. He's just saying if you're looking to meditate, you're not going to achieve meditation if your mind has been idle all day. You're not going to be able to pull it together and focus it at the end of the day. Any comments or questions about that? Okay, please read on.
As I often point out, a retreat or a holiday is meaningful and beneficial only after a whole month's or a whole year's honest and productive labor, but to the unemployed, a holiday or a retreat has no meaning. Therefore, men and women who have exercised their own powers and possibilities in the service of man and who feel, like a chick, that their erstwhile protective shell of individuality is choking them, is preventing them from their fullest unfoldment, to them comes this transcendental urge and vision of pure religion, namely complete self-transcendence in self-surrender, the flowering of manliness into full saintliness.
Okay, would you read that all from that passage from the beginning again? Because here the Swami is making this transition and saying what is required if we're to become transcendental. So please read that over from the beginning.
Okay. As I often point out, a retreat or a holiday is meaningful and beneficial only after a whole month's or a whole year's honest and productive labor, but to the unemployed, a holiday or a retreat has no meaning. Therefore, men and women who have exercised their own powers and possibilities in the service of man and who feel, like a chick, that their erstwhile protective shell of individuality is choking them, is preventing them from their fullest unfoldment. To them comes this transcendental urge and vision of pure religion, namely complete self-transcendence in self-surrender, the flowering of manliness into full saintliness.
So let's take this apart a bit. This business of having unfolded and fulfilled yourself. Notice the phrase, in the service of others, in the service of mankind. And in doing that, and some people do it unconsciously. Some people do it very consciously, like Mother Teresa. Other people do it unconsciously, like Einstein. He didn't think of himself as serving all mankind. He was simply unfolding the gift that he had been given and giving it voice. But nevertheless, he did that. And then who feel, when they have done this, they feel like a chick that their erstwhile protective shell of individuality is choking them, is preventing them from their fullest unfoldment. So this is that feeling that comes over us as spiritual aspirants. This is too limited. This day-to-dayness, this, even though it's been fulfilled and it's been done and it's been done well, it is still too little, too small. So then to them comes this transcendental urge. And this is mumukshutvam. This is that intense desire to push through the push through the gunas and go beyond them. This transcendental urge and vision of pure religion, namely complete self-transcendence in self-surrender, the flowering of manliness into full saintliness. And of course, manliness is, you can hear manliness, womanliness. It's only because he's speaking to a room full of men. He occasionally says men and women anyway. Any comments or questions about that? What it is that each of you is experiencing that brings you here on a Wednesday evening to spend your time doing this. This is what has brought you here. This is your birthright asserting itself in this urge to transcend and become more, fulfill that potential. Each soul is potentially divine, to manifest that divinity. Anything at all from anyone? Okay.
Sorry.
Yes.
So I just wanted to jump in and say, I'm trying to think of how I want to say this. The talk about meditating at the end of a day where haven't done anything. And I know he does not mean, he's not talking to people whose work has been of the mind and not looking to anyone looking on as as honest labor.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Um,
You're absolutely right.
But that is a thing that a lot of people struggle with. It's like you have to work, and that's the only kind of work that's considered work.
Yes. What foolishness. Yes, Ranganathananda started out as a cook at Belramont and worked very hard. But by the time he gave this talk in Perth, Australia in 1978, he was not serving as a cook and he was not digging any ditches. He was going around from place to place, sharing what he had become. And and that became pretty remarkable. Just consider the fact that he gave this talk without any notes or any books in front of him. All the quotes that are in this and so on. So you're absolutely right, Cindy. Honest labor doesn't mean just labor of the hands and the body.
Or shoveling mud.
Say it again, dear.
Or shoveling mud.
Shoveling mud.
Have
No,
a,
it doesn't mean shoveling mud.
I have a songwriter friend, performer friend who wrote a song called Shoveling Mud because back in the earlier days, now he actually supports himself doing his music and for people, but then he was digging ditches and shoveling mud.
Yeah, well,
And that's honest labor, but so is going and setting up and playing music for people and
absolutely, absolutely. Brahmananda surrounded himself with musicians. Wherever he went, he took them with him, or found them there, and invited them to. No, it's certainly the work of the mind and the heart are emphatically work. Anything else from anyone?
Brother, this is Jeff again.
Yes, Jeff.
What I'm seeing in this passage is the phrase, the service of man, that he's not just talking about being productive, but he's talking about serving others. And it's through serving others all day long that by the evening time when we're ready to meditate, we are more inspired. There's more of an urge to meditate because we've been serving others.
Yes, and it's interesting that if we listen to Sri Krishna in chapters 4 through 7 of the Gita, we'll find that we can serve others in whatever we do with and for them, if we see them as the divine being and serve and interact with them in that spirit. So we can be a bank teller. We can be someone who does nothing all day except transcribe medical records into people's charts and databases and so on. But if we relate to what we're doing as service to the divine, then that is service to man, even though, as Cindy pointed out, it may not look like it to someone looking on. They may not see what you're doing, but it doesn't matter what they see. What matters is what you know and what's in your heart.
If you dedicate your shoveling of mud to God, then you're doing it, right?
Precisely. Who are you shoveling the mud for? Who are you digging the ditch for?
What is the mud?
Well, yeah, even that, but but particularly this other of the aspect of service. Who are you digging the ditch for? Why is that ditch being dug? It isn't some exercise that you're doing. It is. Even if you're busting up rocks on a chain gang, those rocks are going to be used somewhere to do something. If you should be so unfortunate as to find yourself in a gulag on a chain gang, you could even serve in that way, as people who survived the Holocaust camps will tell you. It is the spirit in which you do it, and your sense of your acknowledgement that whatever it is that is being done for a divine, an aspect of the divine. And as I said, you don't need to say anything to anyone about it. But I'll tell you, if you go into a workplace with this attitude day in and day out, that my colleagues, my supervisor, the people who run the company, they are all aspects of the divine. And I am serving them in that way. Oh, their transformation in your relationship with them will be remarkable, even though you never say a word to them about it. And that is not a matter of speculation, it is a matter of experience. Anything else from anyone before we move on?
This is the same thing Swami is talking about, where, all the Upanishads teach us, we have to fulfill all the 4 Purusharthas and go to the level after the Vanaprastha, sannyasa, where you renounce all the dharmas, all your duties.
Yes, yes. But the Vanaprastha, what does that mean? It means forest dweller. You've already left behind a great deal when you retire to the forest. So to speak, it can be totally metaphorical, but that's what Vanaprastha means. It means forest dweller. So you've left behind you've left behind those things, and then ultimately you renounce the whole shooting match and focus only on what will bring you transcendence. And why? It's not like there's any imperative. It's not like it's a dogma that this is what you must do. No, you're drawn to it. You're drawn to it. This sense of limitation, the chick being imprisoned in its shell of individuality. That's what we're seeking, is this great, ever greater sense of freedom from limitation. Because that is our true nature. That is the nature of the Atman. Thank you, Bala. Anything else from anyone?
I just, want to, I'm repeating myself and also what the Swami is saying here, but it really is all about the spirit in which we do things.
Yes.
And sometimes we find ourselves in situations that really are miserable.
Oh.
And, offering it is more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
It is, the more painful your situation is. But, it's easy to offer things or be grateful for things, if that's, the take on it, when things are going well. But, when you're in a painful situation, whether it's work or relationships or anything in life, that's where the practice comes in. And if you can, at least some of the time, start to offer it, the misery of that situation will loosen its grip on you.
How well said.
And movement is created to move you out of that situation and into one that's more congenial to you. And, a lot of times when we're younger too, we're talking about working.
Oh, yeah.
We're paying our dues. And
when we're young, we're it's very few of us are so blessed that we come into this world not imprisoned by ignorance. You know, Sri Ramakrishna's direct disciples, even they had ignorance that had to be dispelled. And so, most of them. And so, yes, when we're young, of course we're ignorant. And then as we grow older, the ignorance lessens or changes its form, and we find ourselves easier to offer that ignorance and its fruits, which are the fruits of the gunas. And then ultimately, things change for us as a result, as you pointed out, Cindy, yes. But anybody who even, when Swami Sarvadevananda was here, somebody asked him, do you experience anxiety? Do you get anxious? And he said, of course I do. Now, what he does with that anxiety is probably somewhat different than what you or I might do with it. But nevertheless, of course, as long as we are embodied within time, space, and causation, which is exactly what these are. This is time, space, and causation condensed into this stardust spacesuit that allows us to participate in this. As long as we are in this condition, we're going to suffer. And we will have times when it is very difficult. How, and we're being taught here, how do we deal with that? How do we make that, even that, a part of a greater and greater fulfillment of our true original nature? Anything else from anyone? Okay, please read on.
But that very idea of the transcendental suggests something at the base. What is that base? That is what Sri Krishna calls manliness, which involves the growth of man into the two dimensions of Alpa Atma, or raw ego-centered individuality, and Maha Atma, or ripe ego-expanded and ethically refined personality.
Yes, so the unripe ego and the ripe ego.
Forgive me here, Vyaktitva and Vikasita Vyatitva. Say this 3 times real fast. Vikasita Vyaktitva, as we express it in Sanskrit. The first involves achievement of individual identity and freedom, and the second involves achievement of freedom rising to the level of social and human responsibility. When one surrenders everything to God, one becomes a saint. A saint is one in whose heart God has manifested and who is God-filled.
There it is. They're no longer themselves. They are no longer who they were. They have surrendered all that. Whether they take any formal vows or not is inconsequential in this context. So please read that again. This is right from the beginning of that.
Beginning of which?
Okay.
When one surrenders?
But that very idea of the transcendental from there.
Okay.
And forget the Sanskrit, just go right on past it and don't try to
Okay.
say it, just say what he says afterwards.
Thank you. But that very idea of the transcendental suggests something at the base. What is that base? That is what Sri Krishna calls manliness, which involves the growth of man into the two dimensions of Alpa Atma, or raw ego-centered individually, and Maha Atma, or ripe ego-expanded and ethically refined personality. The first involves achievement of individual identity and freedom, and the second involves achievement of freedom rising to the level of social and human responsibility.
Now, this is what happens to us. This is what happens to a saint. The saint doesn't just go away. No, no, no. Whether they do it silently, or whether, and if you want to know what I'm talking about, read Swami Vivekananda's The Powers of the Mind. This business that rise to the level of social and human responsibility. You can be hugely effective and never say a word to anyone about it. No one will know what it is that you are and are doing, because underneath this appearance, there is unity. And your participation in that unity is what is being talked about here. You rise to the level of social and human responsibility. It doesn't mean you sign a document. It doesn't mean that you may become an Angela Merkel, somebody who in great responsibility leads a nation forward, or you may be someone who is completely unknown. But this is what happens to you. This is what the Swami is saying. Okay, when one surrenders, start again from there, please.
Mm-hmm. When one surrenders everything to God, one becomes a saint.
When one surrenders everything to God, everything. He doesn't mean everything except. This is what a saint does. They enter God because there is no longer any impediment, no longer any attachment to anything that would keep them from that. So when one surrenders everything to God, one becomes a saint. Okay, please read on.
A saint is one in whose heart God has manifested and who is God-filled. Properly understood, that is the most meaningful, lofty, and beautiful consummation of human life.
This is what is meant when the Swami says, to be fully human is to be fully divine. Any comments or questions about this idea of what happens as you transition from the lower, unripe ego self? Which you notice, it's not condemned. It's actually praised by the Swami here and by Sri Krishna. Good, you need to do this. Then what? Then comes the ripe ego. Then comes this even further urge. I see all the impediments. I see all the attachments that are holding me, and I renounce them, and I surrender them all to the divine. Then one enters God, as Rabia says. Rabia is a Sufi saint from the 4th and 5th centuries. The final consummation of human life. Anything else from anyone? And the thing is, this is not something just to be thought about. This is not something to be just said aloud. It is something to be lived. This is the field of action. This is the karma bhumi, as Sri Krishna calls it. The field of action, the place of action. We do this by living it, acting it.
This is Haima.
Yes, Haima dear.
I just want to clarify with you, my understanding when I was growing up from my parents is this type of saint doesn't have to wear kashaya clothes, ochre clothes.
No.
He can be working, he can be doing anything as long as you turn everything into Godward turn inside your heart. That's what my understanding was. Am I correct?
Absolutely. That's why I brought up the subject of Einstein.
Okay.
This is what happened to Einstein.
You don't have to have a
And-
label on the head that I am a saint, and you
No,
don't have to.
no.
Exactly. That's what I was told all along in my life when I was a child.
Absolutely not. I mean, as a matter of fact, the more regalia, the more marks and regalia that someone has on, the more likely they are to be something of an imposter. You know, what is all that about? Why do they need all that? What is it? You know,
Advertisement.
it's like that line from the Beatles. Their chest is covered with newspaper clippings. You know, there's no. What are they advertising? What are they showing?
Exactly. They don't need to
So,
have any publicity. Right. Thank you.
When Vivekananda traveled about in India, he wore essentially ragged clothing,
Mhm.
carried nothing but a staff, a water pot, and a couple of books.
That's right.
Period.
Bible. Right.
And people knew him by who he was, and not everybody recognized him. There's that incredible story of him traveling, Vivekananda, traveling third class on a train.
Mhm.
And they got to a station, and there had been this businessman that had been kind of tormenting Vivekananda, saying, see what your renunciation has gotten you, third class passage, and you have nothing to eat, nothing to drink. And so when they got to this particular station, you couldn't be under the shaded part of the station if you were a third class passenger. So Vivekananda was sitting out. He'd taken as much shelter as he could by a bush, but he was sitting out in the hot sun. And a nearby confectioner or someone who prepared food for others as a living, he had finished what he was doing and was sleeping. And Rama comes to him. This was his Ishtadevata, this fellow. He was a Rama devotee. Comes to him and says, wake up, I have someone I want you to go feed. And he says to himself, well, I'm just having a dream. This is nothing. And he rolls over and goes back to sleep. And Rama comes to him again. And this time he kicks him in the ribs. He says, hey, I told you to get up and fix some food, take some water and some food, take it to the train station, and give it to and by the way, bring an umbrella, something to provide some shade, and feed this fellow that's sitting under the bush. Now, the businessman who'd been sitting in the shade and eating and drinking had continued to taunt Vivekananda. And here this vendor comes and sets up an umbrella, a shade over Vivekananda, brings him food and drink. And Vivekananda says, what are you doing? And the vendor says, well, I was told to do this by Rama. And Vivekananda says, well, you must have the wrong person. You know, I don't know anything about it. And the guy says, no, let me tell you my story. And he tells him the two dreams he had and the fact that he was kicked in the ribs and waked up and said, you go feed and bring shelter and all of this was overheard by this businessman. And he became devoted because of that. It changed his life. Not because Vivekananda did anything to him,
Mhm.
but because the divine did this with Vivekananda. And the reason that this story was told, Vivekananda didn't tell that story. It was the businessman who went and told that story to, I forget which, Vivekananda mission, or I mean Ramakrishna mission ashram he visited in South India. But he was the one who told that story. And then it was confirmed with Vivekananda after the story had been heard. This guy told us this story. Is this what happened? Yeah, that's what happened. So
What an inspiring story.
a life was changed,
Yes.
a life of tremendous worldliness was changed in the course of an hour by something that transpired right there that he couldn't deny it was happening. He saw that Vivekananda didn't have two annas to rub together, you know, let alone call for this vendor and tell him to bring shade and water and food. No, it was Rama who told him to do
Amazing story.
that. It is.
Thank you, Brother Shankara. Thank you.
And said to be
Very
a
inspiring.
completely true story. So
There was another interesting story when he was traveling all over India. I forgot the name of the town. There is one lady, I mean, she is saintly because when we are talking about saints, unknown saints, there are quite a few,
oh, of course.
fed him. And then after he came back from the first time from the US, so he was traveling in the train, and wherever there is, all the people wanted to see and do all these things. Then when he came to that station, he says, I want to see that lady. He was invited by so many people, collectors, these people, that people, to come for lunch and all those things. But he went to this lady to eat.
Yes, yes, of course. Because the food was very pure. And
Then everybody surprised.
And the company was very holy.
Yes.
Yes. So, but this is not beyond the reach of any of us. That's what the Swami is telling us here.
Yes.
All that needs to happen is we make this a priority. We share that feeling of the chick who senses that the shell of individuality is too small, too confining. And how do I live beyond this? How do I go beyond? And as that aspiration grows in us, remarkable things happen, leading to this beautiful consummation of human life. Lofty, meaningful, lofty, and beautiful consummation of human life. And so that's where we'll start next week. Any final thought from anyone about what we've read or anything else that you'd like to bring up in this regard? Thank you for the reading, Jeff. Very nice reading.
It's my pleasure.
In future, don't worry about the Sanskrit. It's always translated afterwards because most of the people in the room where the Swami was speaking, most of them did not speak Sanskrit either. But these people like Ranganathananda feel like they should say it. in the Sanskrit, because it has inherent power, just the language itself. But we don't need to worry about that. So as you're reading in future, if you read in the future, then just slide right on by that.
Well, I'm familiar with some Sanskrit terms, but not others, and
Of course.
it's part of my continuing ed.
Right. Okay. Very good. Anything else from anyone? All right, dears. Om Hari Om. Om Asato Ma Satgamaya. Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya. Mrityorma Amritangamaya. Abir Noiti. Oh, dearly beloved, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from this realm of relentless confusion to thine abode of silence, serenity, clarity, and peace. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from darkness and ignorance to the brilliance of thy wisdom and love. Lead us from darkness and ignorance to the brilliance of thy wisdom and love. Lead us from death to immortality. Light us through and through, light us through and through with thy everlasting, shining presence. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto us and to all beloved beings everywhere. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ji Ki Jai. Durga, Durga, Durga. May we be safe. May we be healthy. May we be cheerful. May we have peace of mind. May we go forward in the loving and protective embrace of the Divine Being as our Mother and Father. So now until Saturday at noon, when we take up Swami Prabhupananda's translation of and commentary on Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, published as How to Know God. That's the next time we'll have an opportunity to get together. Of course, there's always evening arati. You can join us for evening arati. The link is there, 6:30 each evening, except Sundays. And then on Sunday, we'll take up the three gunas. It's a primer on Sankhya, the Sankhya philosophy, and what it is that Sri Krishna and Sri Ramakrishna mean when they say that God alone is the doer through the operation and function of the three gunas. And we'll define the 24 cosmic principles that are the foundational ideas of Sankhya philosophy. So that's what we'll do on Sunday morning at 11. Mother willing for all those things. Any final thought from anyone about all of this? Well, good night to you all.
Thank you, Brother Shankara.
Oh, thank you to all of you. This is always such a joy to be with you and to share this with you. The undercurrent, we all feel it. We all feel that undercurrent, whether any of us says anything or not. Doesn't matter. We are all part of that current of unity and undividedness. And the current flows through each of us. As Sri Ramakrishna says, in each of us is the drawing room that is the favorite place of the divine presence. It's in the heart. So may your hearts be peaceful. May your hearts be that perfect drawing room. Good night, all.